Hello, thank you so much for doing this.
Of course, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you too. I'm really such a big fan of your work.
Oh my
Um,
god. Thank you.
so of
Wow.
course, no, it's I came across like a few TikToks of yours a while ago, and I love your work. I love everything that you stand for. So I'm excited to do this.
A delight to be here.
So yeah, we can just jump right in.
Cool.
There's so much I want to talk about, but I usually just kind of start from the basics. So like, where'd you grow up? What was childhood like for you? Just kind of dive into all of that.
Let's see. I grew up in Western North Carolina, Asheville area, which is a cool town, but I didn't know that growing up. Um, we were very much on the fundamentalist side of evangelicalism. So that meant that as kids, we were my siblings and I were super protected from experiencing anything that was considered worldly. So our little, I was about to say sphere, but it was a triangle. Our little triangle consisted of home and church and school. And we went to a Christian school. We went to a really, really fundamentalist church called a Plymouth Brethren. And then our house was super, especially in my early years. I was the first, the oldest. So parents always kind of loosen up a little bit, I think, as as they get more kids. So
Yeah,
my younger brother, and I didn't exactly have the same experiences, but for me, it was super controlled. The kinds of media I was allowed to consume. What I could listen to, watch, all of that. So it
yeah.
was it was a it was a tight little triangle.
Yeah. Well, so, you hear a lot about that, like the tight triangle and how you're not really exposed to other cultures and other groups and other experiences and perspectives. And
Yeah.
it's just so interesting to me what your view on the queerness and the LGBT community must have been then,
Mm.
especially if you weren't allowed to kind of consume media that was secular or that may have offered a more empathetic or um kinder view of that culture. So like, what growing
Yeah.
up, how was that explained to you, and what was your view of it, and how did you kind of make sense of all of that when you were also you know figuring out who you were as a person, and like making sense of certain feelings you maybe were experiencing.
Yeah. It's so complicated, right? Because on the one hand, there was this subconscious awareness of my own queerness. Not that I ever would have known to call it that, but my own otherness, just feeling different, feeling queer. Um, and so I really quickly had a sense, without anything ever being really explicitly, um, to me, the difference between evangelicalism today and the evangelicalism I was brought up in, which it's a direct line, like it's the same people, but nowadays, we're so we're subjected to all this vitriol from evangelicals. This very outspoken, angry, finger pointing at the queer community, as kind of symptomatic of everything that they believe is wrong with the world, right? So back then, it didn't feel that way to me. I don't remember sermons being preached about queerness, or they wouldn't have used that word either. They would have called it the abomination of homosexuality. Um, uh, I don't. It wasn't. It just wasn't explicit. It was all implicit. It was definitely implied in every part of how I was raised and socialized to be male, and the expectations that I was going to marry a woman one day, and like honestly, the grooming, because that's they love to project their own sins onto other communities, and that's exactly what evangelicalism does. It grooms its kids to take these really rigid, specific social roles, right? If you're a woman, you are going to um, even the girls I met in college, so many of them there had been at the Christian college I went to. So many of them had been like they were there. That MRS degree is a joke for a reason. Like there's some truth to the idea that girls are, even if you're getting an education, even if you're kind of going out into the world for the first time after high school, like there's still the expectation you're going to meet a nice, godly man, settle down, and have babies. And for men, we just like we were socialized and taught that. I mean, all of the stuff that we know now from like pop psychology, like how men just aren't allowed to be in touch with their feelings and um, have to performance, like gender performance as a man is more intricate and more nuanced and more like the requirements and the rigidity around that are so much more stringent and severe than any kind of gender performance you're going to see in a drag show, right? Like
Yeah.
maleness is just the most performative thing I can think of in my own experience for sure. And so I was learning to like fit all of those expectations and those roles, and while at the same time, yeah, knowing that there's something going on in me that's not happening in all of the other boys in my class, kind of thing. So um, I I remember kind of learning the I learned the word lesbian like in second grade or something, and I didn't know what it meant, and I said it to like an older, like my best friend's older brother, and he like his reaction to that word like showed me that that was whatever it was like taboo and like, oh my gosh, what did you just say? Whoa, you can't say, like that kind of a thing. So like from the earliest of ages, even from my peers, I was learning that like, oh, we don't talk about that, we don't express that, we certainly don't approve of that. So um yeah, it was I was kind of grasping. I was in a what felt like a, just an to use a musician term, like an isolation booth, looking for something else that resembled my experience. And I would find it in weird places. Like there was this Christian radio program called Dawson McAllister Live growing up that I used to listen to. And uh, this guy, I don't know what his credentials were or why he was qualified to give advice to teenagers on the radio, but teens would like Christian teens would call into this guy's program, with their problems and their questions. And every once in a while somebody would call in and be like, I'm struggling with this thing. And like that was the first time I ever remember like learning that there were other people like me out there who struggled, quote, quote, air quotes, with the same thing I was struggling with. Um, and so even in that context, it was like these kids would be terrified to say it out loud on the radio, right? And so like you're learning the whole time that like, oh my gosh, we can't talk about it. Like it's so bad that it's like causing these kids to have breakdowns and you know do everything they can to try and change it about themselves, right? To become straight. And that was for sure where all of my energy went from the second I realized that um, my queerness was labeled a sin in my community, and that it had the potential to like cut me off from everything I knew and loved, my family, my church, my whole community, and ultimately God, right? Like that was the scariest part because we were raised to believe that God was, I mean, that was the be all end all of everything, like serving God, loving God, praising God, all of it. And the fear that I would not wind up in heaven where all the rest of my family was going to go was tremendous. It was, it was overpowering and oppressive. So for me, that drove me into a solid 15 years maybe of of like just a good solid 15 years of not being able to be myself. I didn't really come out. I didn't fully come out until I was 28 years old. Um, and in all of that time leading up to it, my high school years, college years, my 20s, I was pursuing all kinds of different ways to try and fix what I perceived to be wrong with me. And it started with um, I came out to my best friend in college who took me to the counselor, uh, campus counselor, who was a Christian. Obviously, it was a Christian college in East Tennessee. And, like that, those were the first moments where got some guidance about my specific situation around how to heal myself and what to pray and the steps to take and those kinds of things. And I self-enrolled later on. I self-enrolled in Exodus, which was the largest conversion therapy
Yeah.
program, reparative therapy, they often called it. At the time, thankfully, that organization's now defunct. But I signed up for that freely, of my own volition. Well, I mean, I say freely, but the pressure was obviously so strong culturally and socially that it drove me
Sure.
to do that. And kind of followed that program for 5 years pretty steadily. Um, and of course, I was never nothing worked. I was never going to change my who I am. And we know that now. I know that now, but at the time, it was just this desperation. It was the grasping for anything that could give me any lifeline that anybody could throw me. And so I spent a long time being miserable. Uh, the periods of my life I was very had a lot of suicidal ideation, and it was just dark. It was a dark, dark time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Man, I'm there's so much I want to touch on. I remember hearing growing up of like these gay conversion programs and things like that that like Exodus and I a few years ago I remember watching Pray Away on Netflix, which was all about that story, which was one of the most powerful documentaries I've ever seen. And um
I still haven't watched it.
I don't blame you.
I'm I'm
You lived
scared.
it.
I'm scared I'll be super triggered if I watch it. So yeah, I still haven't put that one on.
Yeah, I mean, it's from a psychological standpoint even, it's just fascinating the things that people and organizations will do to control and to manipulate and to also like the denial, like just trying to convince themselves that they aren't this thing. And it's tragic. It's such a heartbreaking documentary, but it's so important. um
Hmm.
I've suggested it to many people, and especially being on The Chosen. I'm in Utah now, getting ready to shoot season 5, and
Hmm.
it's one of the largest like pieces of Christian media out there right now, and it's been a really interesting experience having a platform where the vast majority of my listeners and of my followers and fans are from the evangelical community. And
Hmm.
um, I grew up in church, but it was never like a huge part of like my day-to-day life. I went to like a Christian private school, and we went to church every morning before we went to class. And the thing though, growing up, I was also like my mom was the most accepting, loving, open-minded person in the world, and wasn't
Mm.
super religious either. So she kind of like was getting me involved with theater and all of these other programs outside of school. And from there, I that's where I found my community. That's where I found the people who, as a kid with a disability and a noticeable limp, it was in the schools that I was going to where I was feeling excluded or feeling different or less than. And then in theater, it was like I all of a sudden was embraced, and I didn't even think of the fact that I had a limp. I was just they didn't not cast me in certain roles because I had a limp. It wasn't a big deal. And I remember like grandparents or my grandma or other family members saying things like, "Oh, you can't get him in theater because he's going to turn gay." Like they thought that was a thing that would happen.
Mhm.
But like my theater directors and the people that were in the queer community that I was close to were the warmest, most like loving, nurturing people that I had in my life. And that's I remember at a very young age, being like 6 years old, playing Tiny Tim. I had this stomach bug, and there was no other like understudy. So I was backstage like throwing up, and then I'd have to go on stage and sing Silent Night.
Oh
And
my god.
my director, BJ Cleveland, was back there, just like holding me and like stroking my hair and holding a trash can for me and helping me and like then guiding me onto stage. And then as soon as I'd come off, he'd be there to like take care of me again. And it was like, I remember then at that age, I didn't know the depths of everything, or I didn't know like what the how people viewed the LGBT community or anything like that. I didn't have a deep understanding of it yet, but I did know I felt really safe with these people. And then when I was in church, it was so rigid and it was so um like the I was always worried I'd get in trouble, like you can't be loud. And then there was the whole aspect of which I know you relate to of I have something that needs to be healed or needs to be fixed. I have my limp. I have this disability.
Mm,
And as I got older, even now, because of The Chosen, it's like a new wave of it where our creator of The Chosen, Dallas Jenkins, I'm so grateful that he embraced my disability and made it part of the character because we got to explore this storyline of a disabled apostle that isn't healed, and it's not because he sinned, it's not because he did anything wrong or is undeserving. It's just because he doesn't need that kind of healing. He's he is complete as he is, that he's loved as is. And I think that it's such a beautiful message, but it's opened up the doors to a lot of people that are really moved by it, and people within the disabled community and the queer community that have reached out to me that have said they relate to that storyline. Um,
mm.
but I've had also people come up and like that didn't like the storyline that have put hands on me and prayed it over my hip and my leg in the middle of the airport,
Oh,
because
God.
they think that I need fixing or I need healing. So I relate to so much of what you were saying. I think that it's also um, so important to talk about and to you know uh, to start changing some things. Like for this next generation, I have a son who one of his favorite clothing items is his big sister's dress that has a bunch of Mickey Mouse faces all over it. And that's like one of his favorite things. And I think back to like when I was a kid, when we were kids, it was something that like, nope, boys don't wear dresses. Like you can't wear that. But now it's like, no, if he wants to wear that when we're going to Target, like who cares? Where I think that that shift is starting to happen a little bit, and it's because of people like yourself and these kinds of conversations that I think are so important. But I wanted to ask you about, so COVID, I know, was a really big like transitional phase for you in
Mhm.
your journey and going public with a lot of this, like a lot of your music and everything. So like how did all of that start? Like how did COVID affect your journey? And I know it was a time where a lot of people had to like, they were very introspective and had to kind of find ways to fulfill themselves or like rethink maybe decisions they had made because we had all the time in the world. So like
Yep.
what was that journey for you like?
Yeah, that time, man. Will we ever have that much time again?
Yeah.
Um, I had a slow growing interest and just kind of really just fandom of drag over the previous, like, the years leading into the pandemic. I had just really gotten into it, and my husband and I had been binging old seasons of Drag Race, catching up on that world, and we would go out to drag shows in San Diego where we lived, and I had fallen in love with this one particular queen, and was just like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. I just want to be just like her. Um, and but yeah, I just didn't have time. Who had the time in 2019 to do anything extra? Like I had a full time job. I was part of a church community in San Diego where I was the worship leader, and I was also in a band. So and I've always had a bazillion hobbies. So adding drag to that list was just never going to be an option because drag is all consuming. It's everything. You just you do a lot with drag, obviously. So I had gone out a couple times, like Halloween 2019 was the first time I had ever like just kind of tried a full beat in a full costume and everything because it's safe. It's safe to be a little Halloween queen, right? And then I'd gone out to like a couple house parties, and other than that, I was like, well, it's a fun thing to do when there's a party or something to go to. But I never envisioned that it would become my livelihood, my full-time job, my passion, all of it. It's been an insane journey. So yeah, March 2020 hit, and I just kind of settled into I had already been like watching YouTube makeup tutorials for forever, but I really dug in to like the makeup journey at that time and started buying costume pieces from Amazon. And I lived with my husband, and I shared a house with another couple all through pandemic who are both musicians, and we had done a lot of work together, songwriting and stuff like that. So the three of us, the two housemates and me, my husband's not a musician, uh, but the three of us started a weekly, like so many other artists did during pandemic. We just started a weekly live stream where we would do cover songs. We called it Heathen Happy Hour every Thursday night, singing cover songs to like 30 of our Facebook friends who would tune in. And I started showing up to those in drag. It just was kind of this natural, like, well, I'm spending all this time playing with makeup and buying these fun little pieces. Like, let's do it online. Let's do drag online. And that was really where I kind of started to learn this craft, this art form. And um, even then, even at the beginning, I was still just kind of like doing it for me. It was just a thing that I felt compelled and drawn to, which is exactly how I was as a kid. I got in trouble for getting into my mom's makeup and getting into her clothes. Not initially. There's actually photos of me like in our family photo albums, coming out and twirling around in like mom's big skirt or whatever. And so initially they must have thought it was cute, but pretty quickly I think they realized, oh shit, this is a these patterns are going to lead to something that we don't want for our son. So it got snuffed out at an early age, but those impulses were there from the very beginning, from my earliest memories. And they started to like reawaken after 30 years of suppressing them. And it really was just this like meditative, especially painting my face in those early days was just this meditative like way for me to reach back in time and connect with my younger self. It's just inner child work. That's all it was. And I loved it. Like that was such a special time for me, and I always think back fondly on it. Before I knew that it was going to turn into anything else, it was just me sitting there with really shitty makeup, but some of the happiest I've ever been. Some of the most in touch with myself I've ever been. And it really was. It was on TikTok actually that I had my first thing ever have kind of a viral experience. And I just made a video where I was basically practicing what it would be like to give a sermon in drag, because I had been asked to do just that by the pastors at the church that I was. We were all doing virtual church in those days, but they wanted me to get in drag and give the sermon one week, and I was like, I have no context for that. I don't know what that looks like. I've never seen a drag sermon before. I've seen a lot of them now. It turns out there's plenty of drag artists who do spiritual work, but at the time I just didn't know. So I kind of made a little TikTok video where I practiced it and posted it and was like, okay, cool. I guess I'll figure it out. This will work. And then the next morning I had woken up and it had just completely blown up. And the comment thread is what kind of changed everything for me. People just kept saying over and over again, this makes me feel seen. This makes me feel safe. And I realized that that's what I had been doing for myself. Just making that kid version of myself feel seen, giving myself the safety I never had growing up. Because you're always on edge as a queer kid growing up in fundamentalist, especially high demand religious spaces. You are always, am I performing enough? Am I doing the right? Am I saying the right things? Am I speaking the right way? Is my body language correct? Like, it's not safe. And so to give myself that gift and then realize that by doing it for myself in a more public way, like it has the same effect for other people. And that just shifted my whole trajectory. That was when I was like, I don't know. So like the light bulb came on and I was like, I've been a songwriter my whole life. I love music. Had a couple iterations of an attempt at a music career that never really took off. I love performing. I did theater in high school and college. And then I love the creative part of drag, the putting together your face and putting together your costume and all of that. And I was like, I think I can put all these things that I love in one package. And so I set out to record a few songs as Flamy Grant, and in her voice, which was such a liberating experience to start writing in this like Flamy's just this whole other dimension of me, right? That I had never allowed myself to speak from, and so to give voice to those feelings through this drag character that I was creating, it was like it was so exciting, just
Yeah,
magical, you know?
that's
And
beautiful.
yeah, yeah, it was fabulous. So that's kind of how that rolled out, and it just kind of snowballed from there. We were just going to make a 5-song EP, like a little acoustic EP initially. It turned into a full record, and we brought in some really great musicians because I had done a little Kickstarter that did okay, and yeah, next thing I knew, it was like, yeah, it was just growing. It just grew and grew and grew, and then of course last year, what is it, 2 years ago now, 2022. No, sorry, last year, 23. Had that weird moment where the MAGA preacher guy on Twitter came for me,
Yeah,
and then that just like took it to a whole other kind of level in the stratosphere where
yeah,
now people were finding out about me because didn't this guy like said, no one listens to you or cares what you do. Like that's the direct quote from his tweet. And I was like, well, because you said that, now people are listening to me and caring what I do.
yeah.
So
Thanks for that.
thanks for that, buddy.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's so interesting because I haven't talked about this yet on the podcast either, which I'm surprised. Like I've been meaning to, but there hasn't been like an organic way to. But my so one of our crew members on The Chosen, who's like universally among all the cast and crews, one of the favorite people on the entire set. Um, he has a LGBT flag on his like vest, on the vest that he wears for the camera operating. And he himself is a member of the queer community and is just like the sweetest person in the world. And one day there was a BTS video of like we were shooting a scene and you can see him with the camera in the background. Someone zoomed in onto the pride flag and cropped it and made a YouTube video about it and like all this stuff saying why is this on the set of The Chosen, and made a big deal about it. So there was a some journalist on like a far right like website and has this Twitter account with a big following, tweeted it and said like they need to fix this now. This crew member needs to be fired for putting like forcing this on everyone, like for planting a pride flag on the set of The Chosen, like just all this ridiculous stuff. So I just responded one, it was kind of that same thing where it's like I just wasn't thinking about it. One night I went on Twitter and was like, we love and embrace our LGBTQ brothers and sisters on The Chosen. If you don't like that, you can take your homophobia and bigotry elsewhere. And then I just sent it and went to bed. And I woke up to thousands of tweets from people saying, like, fine, fire little James too. And all that, like people just tearing into me. And then another castmate that joined in, and then a few others. And then it was on like the Daily Wire and Fox, like all these stories about it, all because he had a tiny little pride flag on his vest. But it was one of those things that started such an interesting conversation. Like there was a very loud group of people that were very opposed to it. But one thing that was actually surprising to me was the number of people that probably still don't have a lot of experience with other perspectives or other cultures, but were a lot more empathetic and open-minded to the whole thing, which was really refreshing. And a lot of people that were coming to the defense of our crew member and that were like talking about like, guys, it's a show with hundreds of people in the crew. Like there are atheists, there are Buddhists, there are Muslims, there are agnostics, like we have Jewish actors, like all this stuff where we go across the board as far as like spirituality and cultures go within the cast and crew. And we're all able to get along and tell the story that we think has a really beautiful message of love and a really beautiful, it's offering a really beautiful perspective and being told in a way that's really cool. And it was just so interesting to me to see just that one little tweet and that one little flag triggered so many people. But
Yeah.
on the flip side, it was beautiful seeing how a lot of people were able to kind of go outside of their comfort zone and defend something that they maybe don't understand yet. But it was encouraging to see like a step in the right direction, like in the direction of love. And
Mhm.
I thought that was so cool. But I was wondering with you, what was like the response from your community, like at your, the church where you grew up, or, from your family, as you came out and as all of this kind of unfolded? But then on the flip side, like what was there anything that took you by surprise once you did fully embrace that part of yourself?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, well, the response from my community had already happened years and years before any of this, and then I haven't been in touch with like the community that raised me is what I mean.
Yeah.
Then I haven't been in touch with them in a decade or more because of that response. So when I finally came out fully at age 28 and was like, I'm here, I'm queer, I'm dating men, like that's who I am. Um, I got all kinds of feedback, from people who were no longer in my life, folks who I'd gone to church with, folks who like former bosses at a church that I was no longer employed at, felt the need to reach out and you know try to make an effort. I'm sure in his mind, an effort that was made in love to try and bring me back to righteousness as he
Yeah.
saw it. But uh, yeah, it was not great. There was a lot of mutual blocking that happened on social media during that time period. People would block me, and I would just ultimately end up blocking a lot of people as well because I'm like, I'm tired of you like commenting on every post I make. Like this post isn't even about queerness, and you're still on here like wanting to chide me for who I've become and or who I am and the decisions I'm making. So I really had kind of cut ties with almost the entirety of my childhood world and even up into a lot of college. I have a couple college friends that I still we have a Marco Polo group that we chat on and that's it. Like I just don't have friends from my youth anymore.
Mhm.
Like it's wild because my husband is still besties with like all the people he went to high school with. They get together still. They like do some of them all that we all lived in San Diego and several of he was from Albuquerque and he had like I think four friends who all lived in San Diego who
Wow.
grew up together in Albuquerque. I know, which is maybe that's the anomaly, but I've always marveled at people who have friends that are older than that go back to college or sooner or earlier because I'm like I don't have that. I don't know anyone from
Mhm.
those days, and uh, the only exception is my family, and that's been its own journey. Obviously, my siblings we're all great. We're all very close, and my mother has kind of come. She's on her journey. She's figuring things out for herself as well, and I think still cares a lot about her faith and the tenets of it that she believes in. But she also, I think, has been able to kind of transcend the standard evangelical black and white, like,
Sure.
um, I have to reject you in order to stay true to my faith. Like she's far beyond that. She's able to kind of hold the ideal that like I love my children. I'm going to stay close to my children. That relationship is more important than I don't need to spend every waking moment preaching at them about what I believe. And so we have a good relationship. Um, and but yeah, beyond that, it's just like I haven't been in touch with it. So me like coming out again a decade later as a drag queen, like and starting that whole thing didn't really elicit much of a response from that part of my life, that world, because
Yeah.
it wasn't there. They've already written me off, right? Um, but it sure did uh, get a reaction from people I don't know. Like just like what you experienced, I'm sure with your tweet. Just people just chiming into my life. They see one headline and they're like, "Oh, I have a paragraph to write about that on your
Yeah.
page." Um, so uh, yeah, and then the question, like, what might have surprised me during that process, I think just well, our community, the queer community, is um, just so endlessly creative and inclusive, and I mean, it's not perfect by any means, and there is plenty of toxicity within our world, that we have to kind of combat and push back on, as well. But by and large, the hearts of queer folks are just so ready to embrace and welcome and celebrate, because we've all been through it, right? We all know what it's like to be ostracized, and so we're out here creating this family that is, so like erring so far on the side of inclusion, that like you just everybody should always feel loved and celebrated and welcome, and I love that. It spreads into um the spiritual world as well, the religious world. There are more people than I could have fathomed a decade ago, um in Christian churches and Christian spaces, who are affirming and welcoming, and want to celebrate the LGBTQ plus community. And I think that's probably been the biggest, most wonderful surprise of it all for me. Is I've played like four different Baptist churches over the past year. A year ago, I didn't know there were cool Baptists. Like I just, in my mind, like Southern Baptist was all I knew, and I knew that was not a safe place for queer people. But there are, Alliance of Baptists, I think is the denominational subheading or whatever. Who are affirming, and they brought me into their sanctuaries on Sunday mornings to be part
Wow.
of their worship services, and so it's been really incredible to see the work that's being done from within
Yeah.
the Christian community, to try and uh, uh, provide a counter to the narrative that Christianity is opposed and hateful to queerness, because it's not like the faith is itself. The traditions that have been around much longer than evangelicalism, the Bible itself is not. It is not opposed to queerness as we understand it in the modern age at all. And
Yeah.
the fact that this narrative has just so overtaken the far right, and now even just really become such a tenet of like the Republican Party itself, like, which is so controlled by evangelicalism. Like, it's just absurd when you get out from under it, and you just, after you've been out for a while and you look back, you're just like, what? How did we get here? It is a
Yeah.
mess. It's a mess. So it's been lovely to experience a lot of that affirming, um, spiritual tradition,
Yeah.
from a variety of places.
Yeah. I think it is really encouraging, because the other documentary 1946 that's out is another really
Hmm.
important piece of filmmaking, and I think that uh it's really education, and just now through like TikTok and social media, like there's a lot of toxicity and negative aspects of all those things, but um it's an opportunity now to, before it was like people lived in small towns, they'd go to the same church, and what they
Hmm.
heard from the pastor there is all they'd ever know.
Yep.
And it's something that, like, it's really hard to break break out of that. Not that it's an excuse for hateful behavior, but it's really hard for people to break those chains and to
Mhm.
step out and explore other parts of the world. It's a scary thing, and now we have the opportunity to reach anyone pretty much, and to show them like, hey, this isn't as scary as you think it is. This isn't this evil bad thing. And I think there's a shift happening in people's understanding of what queerness is and what drag is. You know, that there's still the fear mongering and like these anti drag laws or all of these crazy things that are happening, but um just the understanding of like drag isn't this inherently like sexual thing that like is targeting children, that people are like, there's so many different layers and aspects to all of it, and how like there are straight people who do drag. There's like all of these different things that people just don't think about or comprehend, and it's about, you know, accepting yourself and expressing yourself and loving
Yeah.
yourself and accepting others. And I think it's such a beautiful art. And I'm glad that more and more people are getting exposed to like what it truly is, what it truly means and stands for.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a shift in the same way. You know, there was how the Bible was used to you know, like keep slaves in check and women
Mhm.
in check, and to and it still is in many instances today, but it's how there it was just universally kind of like women have to obey their husband and slaves have to obey their masters. And if anyone said anything other than that, they were the ones that were like, no, you're crazy, like they would be ostracized. But then eventually culturally there was a shift where we all kind of collectively were like, oh wait, slavery's bad. That's we're not, we don't accept that interpretation of it anymore.
Yeah.
And oh wait, women are equal, we don't accept that. And I think there is that shift happening right now within Christianity that is really encouraging with the queer community. And it's interesting too because so many of my friends that are in the queer community growing up are some of the most spiritual people that I know, and love God and love Jesus as much as any, you know, Southern Baptist that I know, like that are
Mhm,
it's
because we've had to fight harder for that right to exist
yeah,
in those spaces, and so and that is, I think, a nearly universal truth about queer Christians is that you're going to find, if you found a queer Christian, you found someone whose faith is far more sincere than the people who are, you know, screaming at MAGA rallies. Like,
yeah,
far more. Like, they have thought about it way more deeply. They have studied their scriptural texts way more. Like, it is a sincerely held faith, because how could it not be if after a lifetime of being told, you know, that this isn't for you and you're an abomination and this thing condemns you, this thing that you love condemns you. Yeah, no, it's a sincere, and sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you, but
No,
yeah, I
no,
had
it's true. It's
to.
something that I think that's such a common misconception about the queer community, is that it's like that whole notion that when someone leaves their or deconstructs or, you know, leaves
Yeah.
their old way of thinking and then goes into a new like starts living a new lifestyle or being more true to themselves, the mindset within the evangelical community is, oh, they have given into a life of sin, they have
Yeah.
denied God, all this stuff. But it's like, no, like oftentimes they're diving deeper into the Bible. They're diving deeper into their spirituality, and um, I think that it's just such a misconception that needs to be corrected and people need to be educated on. But uh, I want to, before I take up too much of your time, I am so grateful that you were so vulnerable, not just in this podcast, but in all of your platforms and in your interviews. I think it's so important and meaningful and making a difference. But I want to take a break from the, you know, we open up a lot about our insecurities on my podcast and struggles that we've experienced. So I like to end all of them with the same question, which is, what is the thing that you love most about yourself?
Mm. Oh, this is a lovely question. I I kind of love my So I cringe even as I'm about to say this, but if you're an Enneagram person, do you know the Enneagram at all? Have you looked
Uh,
into
a little bit. I'm not like super informed on
Yeah.
it, but a little bit, yeah.
Uh, it can be a helpful tool, and now it's just kind of become this, weird little pop thing that people just use to diagnose other people way too quickly with, as usually happens with these tools. But I'm an Enneagram 8, which all that means is that uh, it's kind of the challenger mindset. Like you know, have kind of a natural instinct to play devil's advocate. I have this natural instinct to like, especially when it comes to issues of justice, like my hackles raise when I see injustice happening, um, and it just causes me like I make a lot of really impetuous, um, not well thought out decisions based on my drive to see justice restored in whatever scenario I may come up against. And as the older I get, the better I get at like taking a beat. But before launching into whatever about to launch into, but I still do love that. Um, I feel really just fortunate that like my personality makeup is one that has kind of allowed me to step into this space of doing drag and doing it in this kind of this spotlighted way that I could never have foreseen happening. But um, where I'm representing these like multiple kind of spaces. The queerness and the drag specifically is its own thing in our world right now, as you've already hit on. It's such a talking point politically, and then but also to be kind of representing as someone who was born evangelical and still has a faith that for better or for worse, like that I'll take that Christian name. And even though every time I say the word Christian, I want to add, 5 bullet points underneath it to like modify and make sure we
Yeah,
understand what I'm talking about.
I'm in the
But
same boat.
yeah, right. Like it's difficult, but um, all of that, like that little soup, that concoction there is just it draws a lot of the anger and ire and negative attention, especially online. And I just my personality makeup is one that fortunately like that stuff just does it's I have Teflon when it comes to that stuff. So I'm thrilled that I get to like put my body and my life kind of on that line, hopefully attract and absorb some of that heat. And then but in defense of the queer kids coming up behind us, right? Like that for me is the be all end all of this. Like I I want, and I hope every generation does this for the next, but we want the next generation to have a better time than we did. I want
Yeah.
y'all to have a happier, better time than I had growing up. And so if that means that um, I can spend a few years of my life doing this job and making music and touring and getting protesters at my shows and people online coming for me, but in the long run that is a step towards a freer world for the next generation of queer kids. Like that's what makes me, that's what I'm most proud of about my work. And not necessarily, I mean, I do take pride in my craft and my songwriting and the art of drag and all of it. But I think what makes me most proud is that I have an opportunity right now that I could never have foreseen, coming up the way I did. That I mean, I can be part of this like coalition of people who are kind of on the front lines, and we're we're gonna make it better. We are like that's the point of what we're doing. We're gonna make it better for those kids coming up, and it makes me really happy and proud to be a part of
Yeah.
that.
You should be proud because you truly are making it better, and I'm grateful. I've got 3 kids, and I'm grateful that they're growing up in the time that they are now to see people like yourself and so many others that are, kind of paving the way. And I can't wait to see what you do next. I want to ask, like, I want you to plug any of your social media or like any other tour dates or anything like that? And also, I want to ask, do you have any plans to be in like the Dallas Fort Worth area at any point? Because if you are, I'll be there.
Am I? I might be in Dallas. Um, I'm doing a like 8 city Texas tour as part of another thing. I won a songwriting competition last year
Oh,
at
cool.
Kerrville Folk Festival, and so we are. None of these locations say Dallas, but they're like smaller towns. So I don't know. We might be in the area,
Okay.
but I think I will also be in Dallas in the fall. So yeah, like I'm touring basically this whole year. My poor husband, I have just left him at home with the dog, and I'll come home for a couple days, and then I'm out again. So yeah, just check my website for tour dates. I'm literally all over the country. Flamygrant.com slash shows is where you can find tour dates, and yeah, I'd love for people to come out and see a show. They're a lot of fun. We have a really good time. We have a meaningful time, I think. And then I just finished recording a brand new record in Nashville that we'll be putting out. We'll be dropping some singles this summer, and then the album should come out this September. And uh, I'm really excited about it. I'm making some statements with it, and I hope that it uh, encourages a lot of people, and I hope it also like uh, makes other people nervous.
Yeah.
That will be coming out, and yeah, so just touring, making music, doing my thing.